Hello, welcome back to my channel, Family Tech, where you get all the tech tips, news, and information you didn't even know you needed. So today is internet safety, which is something that people are always talking to me about and always trying to figure out for their kids. And so I brought on the guru for internet safety, the CEO of FOSI, which is the Family Online Safety Institute. So, Stephen, tell me a little bit about yourself and your organization and kind of all of that.
Well, first of all, thanks so much, Sarah, for having me on. Really, really appreciate it and love your shows. FOSI, we set it up in 2007. The mission, it's a simple mission, but it's the most challenging thing I've ever taken on to make the online world safer for kids and their families. And to that end, we work in public policy, we work in industry best practices, and something we call good digital parenting. So we take everything we learn from the lawmakers and the regulators, mix it up with what the companies themselves are doing, and then we try to translate that into language that parents can use in their everyday lives with their kids.
And that's so important too, because, a lot of parents aren't speaking tech, so they don't understand the dangers. They don't understand the technology. So it is really important to get that in kind of a way that they can understand.
Yeah, I mean, parents would prefer to do the birds and the bees talk than to talk technology with their kids. I mean, at least they know how it works, right?
Right.
But then when they start to try and talk about the latest app or the latest website or the latest meme, their kids start rolling their eyes, particularly the teenage kids are going, oh, for God's sake, you know, can't we just have dinner,
Right.
rather than do that? But, it's
Yeah.
important to still express the values of the family, get through to them that maybe you as a parent are not completely au fait with all of the tools and the technologies, but there are going to be some rules here in this house. And we're going to bring you in, we're going to incorporate you in making those rules. But there's going to be some consequences if you go over the line.
For sure. And speaking of that, sorry to kind of derail from my set questions, but you guys actually have a really great contract that you can create for your kids, a downloadable contract just right on your website that parents can use as a tool to kind of set those rules and regulations. Excuse me,
Yeah,
rules and regulations.
yeah. It's at our website, fosi.org, and follow the links for good digital parenting. There's a ton of resources there, but the online safety agreement is the most downloaded tool that we have. And what we tried to do is to kind of distill all of the things we've been talking about over the last, I don't know, 15 years or so into some very simple, easy to understand instructions. But we also left 2 or 3 lines blank. And we think those are the most important part of the contract. That's when you sit down with your kids and say, all right, what else do we need to do it? And if you engage your kids in that, it's surprising how much they will come forward with thoughts and ideas, particularly for their younger brothers and sisters, as to what the rules should be. And then another fascinating conversation is to get them to write down on a piece of paper so you can't see it. If you break this rule, what should the consequence be?
Yeah.
And
I think,
again,
yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
all I'm saying is kids can be pretty severe, either on themselves, but particularly on their siblings.
Right.
So, and you could write it down, and maybe there's a compromise in the middle, but they're learning negotiation skills from you. They're getting involved and engaged in this process, so they're far more likely to own it and to cooperate with you.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree with that for sure. Make sure they have buy-in to whatever it is you're talking about.
Yeah.
And when you're sitting down and talking to them, okay, what do you think should be labeled inappropriate? And you can also guide that conversation for sure.
Right.
But, like you said, they will come up with stuff that you're like, oh, you know what? I didn't even think about that. You're right.
When I go into middle schools, particularly, First of all, the kids can't stop talking about technology.
I'm
They
sure.
desperately want you to know about what they're doing on Fortnite, or
For
some
Minecraft, yes.
Minecraft, or some pony they've just created, whatever it is. They are
Yes.
so excited. And I think that that's an in for parents, not to ignore it, not to just kind of, oh, I can't stand it. Engage with your kids. And if you talk with them and go online with them, they're more likely to point out where problems arise.
Yeah, and that's so true. And it, creates that kind of bond where, hey, we can talk about technology and it's not going to be like you're in trouble for this and things like that. But you can also really create a nice bond with them. I get parents asking me all the time, hey, what do you think about this app or what do you think about that app? I'm like, well, download it yourself and try it out. Or when Among Us was like super rising in popularity, I'm like, go ahead and play a few rounds with your kids and see what it's all about, see what they're going to get into. And then you can go from there. Okay, yeah, I don't think this is appropriate for our family, or yeah, this is great. And you might even become more obsessed with the game than your kids are. So I think that's super important.
Yeah, we were seeing that particularly with TikTok in its early stages, where
Mhm.
kids were creating not just videos with their parents, but they were involving their grandparents too. So we had this sort of multi-generational involvement. And in some cases, parents and grandparents hadn't a clue what was going on, but it engaged them to such an extent as to start asking questions. Well, show me something else that's going on here. Or do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and also we found that a lot of those cross-generational videos were taken outdoors. And the idea of using tech to go outside is wonderful. I mean, Pokemon Go is a great example of
Oh, love
where
that. Yeah.
kids are dragging their parents literally out on their bicycles or in their cars. Please
Yeah.
take us to the local park. And they're like, what on earth for? Um,
Yeah.
so that sort of mix we think is really healthy.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what would you say, you know, all the things, there's so much advice. Parents get super overwhelmed. What do you think is like the most important thing for parents to understand when it comes to internet safety?
Well, our number one piece of advice is to talk with your kids. It's the number one of our 7 steps, and it's the least technical.
Right.
You can talk with your kids without any screen whatsoever.
Yeah.
And we think you have to talk early because kids are getting online earlier and earlier. And you have to talk often. And we like to think of back to school as a perfect opportunity to brush off whatever online safety agreement you have in your family and review it. Now that you're going to middle school, now that you're going to be a senior in high school, whatever it happens to be, now that you have a driver's license, this becomes sort of a teachable moment. And of course, as the technology evolves and they maybe get their first phone or their first gaming console, or a big shift that happens middle school, high school time is they start coming off the parental controls that you have set,
Yeah.
because by this time they've learned how to get around them anyway.
Truth.
And and you shift them to what we call online safety tools. And these are the tools that TikTok and Fortnite, most of the Instagram, many of the big sites have created tools for the kids themselves
Mhm.
to keep them private, to keep them from putting something that might be inappropriate, maybe to block someone, how to report an abusive tweet that you might have received.
Yeah.
And by the way, we did research on this last year. Not surprisingly, the attitudes of teens towards parental controls was not very high. But
Weird.
their attitude in use of online safety tools was much greater than we expected. And
Interesting.
in many cases, they're using these even without their parents' awareness. Because when we ask parents about these tools, they're like, never heard of them.
Right.
So that is another teachable moment. Let's say they're going to high school. Let's say you're taking parental controls off. Okay, now show me how you're going to stay private on Facebook. Show me where the controls are to report somebody on Instagram or TikTok. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then it becomes you're more of a co-pilot with them. Um, we talk about sort of going from blocking to talking,
Nice.
and from monitoring to mentoring.
Nice. I love that.
So you're more of a mentor to them. And I'm speaking to those helicopter parents out there. You know, it's time to land and get out of there and sit alongside your kids
Yes.
as they do this.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I love what you said about back to school being a great time to kind of revisit those contracts, open up things. Okay, now you're a little bit older. So, what can we take off? Like, what do you think we don't need to do anymore? Do we still need to do app approvals at this point? Do
Right.
we need to, have this monitoring in place? At the beginning, I definitely am locked down. I've got a ton of different parental control apps. But yeah, just this year, my daughter's turning 17 in a week, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I took this off and I took that off, and then it was funny, like you said, she still has a bedtime on her phone. We have Android devices, and so Google Family Link basically shuts down the whole device
Hmm.
at bedtime. And I was like, oh, hey, I can remove all this. She has a job now that that keeps her out late. And she's like, actually, can you keep the bedtime on? I'm like, sure, if you want to keep it on, that's fine. So, like you said, they kind of get that and like, hey, I really like that it shuts down. And it kind of gives me time to like not pay attention to my phone.
Yeah. It's ironic too, because our younger daughter really, pushed against any kind of restrictions whatsoever. But when she got her driver's license, uh, we insisted on her having Life 360 on her phone. Again, she rebelled against it. Dad, it uses up so much of my battery. And I was saying, well, just plug it in a little more often. Um,
Bring a portable charger with you.
She had a minor accident on a very rainy night in the middle of winter. And boy, she managed to quickly call me. And then I looked on my app and saw exactly where she was. And she was very grateful for that.
Yeah, so I love that where you can show, hey, this isn't just to like, I'm not watching it at all times, like watching your every move, but when something happens, it's really helpful that I can help. I can find you right away and we can get it resolved.
Yeah, and that actually goes to one of the other of our 7 steps. Friend and follow, but don't stalk.
Yes.
So, again, my younger one at 11 and 12, Dad, I want to get onto Facebook. Everybody's on Facebook. I said, well, you're not on it, so not everybody is. I hate your job, because she knew that if she did X, Y, or Z, I could actually pick up the phone to somebody at Facebook because I happen to know the people there.
Sure.
And so she absolutely hated my work. Later, she liked it because I helped her with some internships. But
oh, nice.
When she turned 13, she got onto Facebook, but I said, on condition that I'm your first friend. And I said, I promise, though, not to be one of those annoying parents and comment on everything
Right.
that you post.
Yeah, please don't do that.
You'll lose your kid that way very quickly.
Right. For sure. Oh, I love that. And yeah, so I've been in IT for over 20 years, and my son sometimes he's 13, thinks he knows more about technology than I do, and I have to gently chat. I'm like, what is it you think I do for a living, sweetheart? Like, yeah, I know how to do that.
Right, right. The problem is things are moving so fast. I mean, I'm having to play catch up all the time, and I've been at this since the mid '90s. I mean,
Right.
I finally broke down and bought an Oculus headset, and started going
Sure.
online and doing all that stuff. And I just thought, whoa, there's another whole universe I know nothing about.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to keep beginner's mind wherever dealing with technology.
Oh, for sure. And yeah, I love that you said that because, even though I am a tech expert, you're a tech expert, you know, the kids can still, like, there's new things happening all the time.
Yeah.
And, if you have that mindset where, like, no, I don't know everything, but I can find out. That's an important mindset to have because a lot of parents who aren't tech experts, are like, it has to do with technology. I just don't know. I don't know it. I don't understand it, and they kind of throw up their hands and give up. And, I'm trying to show them actually, just a little bit of research, just, follow family tech, go on FOSI.org and find these stuff out. And you can have that knowledge as well.
Well, or just simply Google it. I mean,
Right.
it's astonishing if you put Roblox settings, not only will you get a lot of text, you'll get 2 or 3 YouTube videos that show you exactly how to do it. So there really
Right.
is no excuse for not knowing. Well, you may not know something, but there's no excuse for not trying to go and find it.
Right.
So, just yes, it takes a little bit of effort, but it's well worth doing. Not dissimilar to the don't stalk law rule,
Sure.
is our number 7, which is be a good digital role model yourself. The
Mhm.
number one complaint we get from kids is that they can't get their parents' attention.
Yeah.
I went to cuddle mom on the couch, but she was on her laptop. Dad's always just checking his email at dinner.
Mhm.
For heaven's sake, parents, put your technology down and meet your kids face to face. They want you. They want that human connection, um, and they will do what you do, not what you say to do. So
Absolutely.
if you're telling them to limit their screen time, but you can't wrestle the phone away. I mean, one of the things I say at PTA meetings is I ask parents how many of you use your phone as an alarm clock? And
Mhm.
2/3 of the hands go up, and I just say, don't. And they look like, why? And I'm like, well, what's the last thing you'll look at before you go to bed? What's the first thing you'll look at in the morning? And you'll be checking your email and your Twitter feed before you've even brushed your teeth. And if you have young kids, I don't know about you, but our ones, they love to jump on our bed first thing in the morning. If you have that blue haze on your face because you've
Yeah.
got your phone in front of you, well, what do you think they're going to want?
Yeah.
So,
I'm a huge early riser. I get up before everybody. So
so you can cheat. That's okay.
right. Well, but I exercise. Like, I do have a morning routine, but yeah, modeling good behavior is so important, and especially when your kid comes and talks to you. And my aunt actually, even before phones were a thing, she taught me a really important lesson where anytime like a child is speaking to me, I drop whatever I'm doing, I like turn and face them and like give them that attention, because that's really all they're looking for is,
Right.
whether they're telling you whatever, whatever's happening in their lives at that moment, making sure that, so now when my kids come to me, if I'm on my phone or something, I'll put it down, face down, and be like, oh, okay, so tell me about that. Okay. Or if I'm watching TV, I'll pause the TV. Okay, let's talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. And then, that gives them a good model of what they should do when they're interacting with humans as well.
Well, and another tip I heard was if let's just say, for instance, you're ordering pizza on your phone, you could say to your 3 or 5 or 7-year-old, I'm just ordering pizza. And now I'm looking up, how to get you to swim club after that.
Right.
Because look, the map's on my, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Verbalize. Otherwise, they just think you're looking at a YouTube video or something. They don't know.
Right. Yeah. Like, and especially because if they come and interrupt you, like, if one of my kids were to come in right now, I'd be like, excuse me, I'm on a live right now. Can you come back in a half an hour or so?
Right. Yeah.
So it doesn't always have to be drop everything. They do need to understand respect and not interrupting people and doing that sort of thing. So yeah, just telling them, okay, we're gonna talk about this. Let me just finish looking up where your swim team is because we gotta go soon and I gotta find out where that is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the challenge is for parents is that, we've integrated work into our homes, and the pandemic supercharged that.
For
So we're
sure.
doing stuff at home around our kids and dogs that, historically we never did because you went out to work. Add on top of that, we then have integrated school life into home in a big way where kids were having to take classes at home and so on. So it's a mess. I mean, it's a jumbled up, blurred lines. The boundaries are really, really hard to make. But we're humans. We know how to adapt to new things. Luckily, the kids are going back.
Yeah.
I'm in the office 3 days a week, so I mean, that's starting to feel more normal again. Um,
Right.
but we should just pause and realize how much pressure we've put it this way, society has put on families
Hmm.
by expecting us to be, on call throughout the daylight hours, just about.
Yeah, basically. So with all these like regulations and stuff, what kind of rules do you think parents should set for the internet in their house? Like, do you have any like hard, fast rules that you recommend for most families?
So we talk about tech-free zones and tech-free time zones. So what am I talking about? I mean, and this would be up to each parent, each family to decide. But an example of a tech-free zone is the dining room table or the kitchen table, wherever it is you eat particularly your evening meal, but maybe any meal, that you don't bring your devices there. That
Mhm.
is a sacred place. Even if you're just putting down some cereal, you're going to engage each other. You're going to talk to each other, and please, please don't be that family that gets to the restaurant and all it takes their phones
Oh,
out. And
yeah.
I saw a family of 7 the other night, and I thought, why don't you just get takeout
Right.
and go to your own bedrooms and eat on your own? I mean, it just felt like you're wasting your time here. Anyway,
Yeah.
so that's a tech-free zone. I would also say, particularly for younger kids, but I think teenagers too, the bedroom is not a great place for any kind of technology,
Mhm.
because we found our teenage daughter texting at 2 in the morning. Not surprisingly, she kept her phone under her pillow. She then had to, and we created a closet downstairs where we would put all of our mom and dad to technology at night to plug it in. What we didn't realize, or what we suspected, was that she got an iPod Touch from a friend. Um, so we used to take the router to bed, you
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
except that she tuned into the next door neighbor's router because she used to babysit for them. And of course, you
She
give
had the password.
the
Yeah.
babysitter the password. So, I mean,
Right.
it's a struggle, is what I'm trying to say. You set these
Absolutely.
parameters, and now she lost all kinds of rights for about a week, and
Of course.
she felt like her life had come to an end. She's a very healthy adult now, but
That's
so
good.
and then the tech-free time zones. You gave an example of your own daughter. It really is ideal to have these switched off at least a half an hour, if not an hour, before bedtime.
Yeah.
In some schools, middle school parents have talked about creating a school-wide curfew at 9 p.m. That way, every kid in that school has had either their phone or their devices taken from them, or they've been switched off, and they
Yeah.
know they're not going to miss out on anything. And for high schools, maybe it's 10 o'clock.
Sure.
There's a city in South Korea I read about that turned it into a local ordinance, and you can get a ticket if they see that you. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's a great idea, but
Yeah. I'm like, wow.
you get the idea.
Yeah.
Create these times, and obviously whenever homework's being done, although that's complicated because a lot of kids do homework online.
Right.
um, but maybe they're using their school issued tablet or laptop. They don't necessarily need their phone next to them as well.
Right. And I love a couple points I want to like really highlight that you talked about here. The time zone thing, I love that. It's always been a thing. And I love that you said the parents too, because that's something that I've talked about as well. Is when the internet goes to bed on, like, we have a router that has built-in parental controls. So the internet goes to bed at a specific time every night. And that's across the board. It's for mom and dad, it's for the kids and everything like that. So you're modeling again that good
Yeah,
behavior where you're like, hey, it's bedtime. I don't need the internet right now. And they really can learn that. And I think personally, I think a huge reason for all of the mental health crisis and things like that is not necessarily the social media platforms themselves, but the lack of sleep that kids are getting because of it.
right.
And like that's just kind of my own soapbox that like in the research that I've looked at and things like that, I'm like, it's really boiling down to these kids are not getting good quality sleep every night.
Mm.
And I think that's really what's causing a lot of problems with this mental health.
Well, I had the privilege of traveling to Japan a couple of years ago, and their kids they're under such pressure for all in all sorts of directions, academic, for their families and so on, but also with their friend groups. And if you don't respond within 5, 6, 7 seconds to a text, they kind of consider you out of the group. And so they were taking their phones to bed and putting them under their pillow and putting it on vibrate, just like my daughter.
Right.
But Docomo, one of the phone makers there, actually started to market waterproof phones because the kids were taking it into the shower as well and into
Wow.
the swimming pool if they had a swimming lesson because they didn't want to miss a text. That's
Wow.
that's that's not great. That's not a
No, that's pressure. My gosh.
And thank God they didn't have phones when I was growing up. I probably wouldn't have my job for a start. There'd be far too much evidence against me. Um, so yeah, I'm not surprised they're anxious. I'm not surprised that they're worried. I'm not surprised that there's this kind of almost performance anxiety. And I'll never forget. So we had this wonderful carefree, tween. She gets her social media accounts and she gets her phone and starts coming back from birthday parties. And instead of just sharing, all the great things they did and the cake they ate, she had to go straight online to see the photographs that kids were posting about that birthday party and to ask people to take things down. So there was a kind of curation going on at such a young age. And I just think, damn, I wish I'd held out till she was 18 instead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and even today, I don't even think that's feasible to hold out for that long,
I know.
just because it's such a way that they all communicate. And it's hard for, parents, kids are getting phones at 8, 9, 10. I mean, and that's kind of the norm these days.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute because
Okay. Yeah. Let's.
that's probably the number one question we get asked. What
Yeah.
age should I get my uh, kid a phone? And I said,
Yep.
well, tell me about your kid, first of all.
Yes.
Um, there's a really great organization, I think, that started in Texas called Wait Until 8th. I don't know if you've
I've
heard
heard
about
that.
it.
Yeah. Nope. I've heard of it. Yeah.
The idea is a bunch of parents got together in a school, said, look, let's wait until 8th grade to get our kids a phone because we're all getting pressured, and the original question was when should I get my high schooler a phone?
Right.
Then it became middle school. And then we started seeing kindergartners show up with mom's old iPhone, the pass back ones where
Yep.
mom's driving or dad's driving and they pass the phone back to shut the kid up.
Right.
And then they never get the phone back
Right.
for various reasons, or they upgrade and so they're handing their 6, 7, 8 year olds these supercomputers with internet connections. No, no, no. Our advice is, And all right, let me address something else. Parents,
Sure.
particularly in our country, God help us, are worried for their children's safety at school.
Yeah,
It's just a reality
it's true.
of our world. And
Yeah.
so, of course, parents want to be able to get in touch with their kid and their kid get in touch with them.
Yep.
And ideally, know where they are.
Mhm.
And a phone does that. You can phone them or text them. They can phone or text you. And if you have Life 360, you've got a GPS tracker.
Yep.
The only problem is they can also access Playboy, and Playboy is nothing compared to what they can really access. And
Right.
you know where I'm going.
Yeah, for sure.
So there are products now on the market. Gizmo is a good example from Verizon. And a disclaimer, Verizon is a member, but so are about 20 other companies, some of whom are also in competition with Verizon. But
I do a
Gizmo,
lot of work with Verizon. I've written for Verizon's website before, so
okay,
big fan.
I'm, give them credit. They went
Yep.
out and created what looks like an iWatch,
Yep.
right? I mean, the first iteration was a bit clunky, but they've got it looking cool now.
Yeah.
And the kid is allowed up to 10 phone numbers in there, mom, dad, granny, grandpa, whatever.
Yep.
And they can call or text up to these 10 numbers. And it's a GPS tracker. Oh, and it has a step counter too, and maybe a couple of games to make it fun. But
Right.
that's all a first or second or third. That's all an elementary school kid needs.
Totally agree. I had a little kind of progression of, the types of devices. Unfortunately, my first progression has gone off the market, which was the Relay Go. It was just a
Yeah,
little like, basically walkie-talkie that worked on the cellular network,
yeah,
which I recommended for, first, second, third grade, whatever. But when they got to later elementary, Gizmo was my next choice for sure. That's my progression because I love the Gizmo. You don't have to be a Verizon customer to subscribe to a just specific Gizmo plan. Like you can create a plan that's just for that device.
right.
It's a little more expensive than adding it to your own plan, but yeah, I do love that Gizmo device. That my kids had that when they were younger, and I totally agree. That's the a great next step in that progression for sure.
Right. And that should take a kid through most of middle school. I mean, middle school is tough, let's face
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yes.
and it's got elements of high school, but in some ways, it's a tough time. So if you can hold out to seventh or eighth grade on that, you then don't have to get them a $2,000 phone, for heaven's sakes.
Yes.
And again, I want to shake some parents. You're not allowed to shake kids, but you can shake a parent and say, "What are you thinking of?" Just
Yeah.
because little, Janie has asked you for this doesn't necessarily mean you have to give it to her.
Right.
Um, and remind them when you do give them a phone, whatever type it is, that actually you bought it, you're paying the monthly. So actually, it's your phone that you're temporarily allowing them to use. A little
Yeah.
bit like when I grew up, I used the clunky old dial up phone in my house.
Yeah.
That wasn't my phone.
With the cord stretched all the way to my bedroom.
So it's again, it's tough for parents. I'm not saying it's an easy thing to deal with.
No.
Um, and again, we also have to recognize there's quite a continuum that parents are not all the same, like kids are not all the same. And the continuum, goes from heavily authoritarian at one end to ridiculously liberal with a small L at the other. I
Yeah.
mean, we were doing some focus groups in Baltimore, and this dad, ex-military, was saying to us that he had cloned his 17-year-old daughter's phone so that every keystroke came through to his phone, but she was not aware of it. And we
Yeah.
said, why have you done that? And he said, well, to keep her safe. And I said, well, what happens when you have to confront her with something that you've seen?
Yeah.
and he hadn't really gone there in his head. We didn't finish the conversation because something else happened, but dot, 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 you lose your daughter's trust and faith in you as a parent because you've gone and done something totally without her knowledge and agreement. So when you do set up parental controls, do it with your kids, make it a family activity. The other end of the spectrum, the ridiculous liberal end, we've known parents who've put, well, yeah, we gave her a television, a laptop, and a phone when she went to school. Oh, which school? Elementary.
Yeah.
And I thought, what? And then walked out the door. Well, pretty much, we trust her.
Trust. Because kids have really good frontal lobes that help them make correct decisions at all times.
Well, I was wondering about this parent's own frontal lobes,
Right.
whether they ever got stitched up. But no, you don't stick any kind of screen in a kid's bedroom and walk away, except expecting it all to go well.
Right.
We've got to find that sweet spot, and rules, but also give kids enough room to breathe and to make their own mistakes so that they can learn from those mistakes. And if you keep the dialogue going, don't clone their stuff, keep the dialogue going, they're more likely to come to you when bad stuff happens than if you literally just tell them that they're going to lose their privileges and everything will go away if I see a naked body on that screen.
Right. Absolutely. Which kind of leads into this next question. You answered it a little bit, I think, but what are your thoughts on monitoring versus giving kids some privacy?
So again, let's think of a continuum. When a kid is born, they have zero privacy, right? In fact, they have so little privacy, they have no idea their pictures are being sent all over the internet. Which, by the way, we tell parents to calm down a little bit about that. Don't overshare. There's this kind of, I'll get to your question in a minute, but there's this kind of digital coming of age now with 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds who suddenly are realizing to their horror that the pictures of themselves have been posted by their parents since they were born. Actually, even prenatal pictures.
Right.
And here's Johnny's first poop.
Right.
There's stuff that is going to embarrass the hell out of them now that they're in middle school.
Right.
So parents, just be aware of that. Share it privately. It doesn't have to go to everybody on the web. And think of the fact that at some point your kid will have some need to be private.
Right.
So back to my original point. At 0, they have no privacy. At 18, legally at 18, they have 100% privacy, right?
Right.
So is it the case that at 17 and a half, they still have 0 and then they go to 100%? Or do they have some, in other words, do their privacy increase? And the obvious question is yes, it's a gradient, it's a curve. And my feeling is that particularly around the time that parental controls start to come off and they start to use their own online safety tools, including privacy settings that they set themselves, they should be allowed a certain amount of privacy. Now, if you are noticing big changes in behavior, or they're acting erratically or losing weight or gaining weight or whatever, yes, then it's time to sit down with them and say, okay, I need to see what's going on. Show me your phone, show me where you are online. Of course, kids are up on that. They have Finstas, a Finsta, right?
Yeah. Fake Instagram account. Yep.
Fake Instagram. And there are other forms of Finstas on the platforms, not surprisingly. So they will seek out their own privacy anyway. But oftentimes, as a bit like your older daughter too, they're almost desperate for some form of intervention because it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to handle as an adult, never mind as a hormonal teenager, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. And I love that your point, and we have a couple questions. So, people who ask those questions, we'll get to those in just a minute.
Sure.
Um, but to your point, where I'm the like new mom sharing all of these pictures, and then as a teenager, they're discovering all these pictures. That's actually a really great teaching moment too,
Mm,
when you can say, "Hey, see, when you post something, it's permanent. It's going to be there forever. So be aware of what you're posting online because that can come back and hit you. I can try and delete all these pictures of you till the cows come home, but they might still be out there. And I can't take that back. So, apologize. I'm sorry I overshared your first poop, but this is a good teaching moment that like anything you post can be available forever."
right, right. So, yes. So, yeah, that's a good position to start with. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had overshared.
Right.
If you give them that, they're more willing to hear you, and then be more willing to kind of consider. Oh, geez, it's always fascinating to watch particularly high schoolers in the freshman and sophomore years, where
Mhm.
their social media activity just explodes because they're desperate to be, I don't know, acknowledged, verified, liked. They want to be on these, but then this turning point happens sort of in halfway through junior, and then obviously in the senior years as they're applying for college, they start scrubbing all of their social media,
Right.
and it all just looks really shiny and bright, and all these wonderful awards that they've received.
Yeah.
So, just remind them if they need to be reminded that colleges will be peering in on this, and your first and second and third employer will also be doing a search on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I usually preface monitoring, and again, I don't do anything without sitting down with them. Okay, this is exactly what I'm putting on your phone. This is why, this is what it's going to do, this is what it's going to tell me. And make sure they have that buy-in. I mean, it's not negotiable. I am doing this, especially at the
Yeah.
beginning. But when I'm monitoring, I make sure like, hey, you know what? That can be permanent and your first job might see that. So, do you think you want to take that back or,
Mm.
having those conversations when you see something that they've done and, continuing those conversations like you said. One of my favorite examples is I have Bark installed on my kids' devices, which I think is good because it allows them a little bit of privacy because it's only going to flag me if it sees something concerning. So I'm
Mhm.
not going to see like their entire text thread. I'm just going to see like the part that was concerning. And so I saw something from my son. It said, sexual content and everything. And I see that he was looking up bouncy balls, like bouncy balls. And so I pull him, I'm like, Michael, you are in so much trouble. And he's like, what? I'm like, see, you were looking up sexual content. He's like, no, I swear, I totally wasn't. And then I pulled it up and he starts laughing. He's like, oh, yeah, that was totally inappropriate. So you can have those fun conversations where you're
Yeah,
like, hey, I know you weren't really doing anything bad, but like this is what it showed me.
yeah,
So, let's have a big laugh about it.
right, right. Yeah, or, I've got a biology class tomorrow and I had to look at naked ladies, and
Right, exactly.
sorry. I tried
Yeah.
that when I was a kid, whatever. It's a it's I guess that's a teachable moment for the birds and the bees, that's the other
Right.
conversation.
Yeah, and having those conversations. My guest last week was actually Clay from Fight the New Drug, and so we talked a lot about pornography and pornography addiction and things like that, and taking that shame away from it, where you're just having these conversations frequently. Hey, I noticed you were looking up some bad things. Can we talk about that? What were you curious about and things like that, just to make sure it's not a like, oh my gosh, you're in so much trouble right now. Because then in the future they're not going to come to you and say, oh, I saw something bad. um because they think you're gonna be mad and they'd be in trouble again.
Well, and go back to the example of the father with the cloned phone. Can you imagine if his 17-year-old typed, "Am I a lesbian?" You know?
Right,
I mean, come on. That's I mean, that it would be over in that family.
right. Yeah,
So it's all about this kind of, it's a lifelong conversation.
For sure.
Um, as early as, there's some incredible videos, unboxing videos, not my favorite, but there's an unboxing video of a 2-year-old unboxing a brand new iPad that she has never seen. Dad's doing the video.
Yeah.
And within 30 seconds, she's figured out how to switch it on. And within a minute or two, she's online. I mean, she's on the internet.
Right.
So it's the technology has become so intuitive. Steve Jobs used to describe it as magical, that your toddlers are tech savvy. So you need to also explain, there might be some things that are going to be hurtful or surprising, or you come and talk to me if that happens.
Right. Yeah.
Switch it off and come and talk to me.
Yes, that's exactly what I usually, say to my kids. Even, I've been in IT for 20 years. We've had a ton of technology in this house. So when they're toddlers, I'm like, hey, if you see naked mommies and daddies, turn it off and come and tell me. Having those conversations super early has made it super easy for, when my son comes across something inappropriate, he'll come, hey, you know what? I saw something inappropriate on my computer. He's
Right.
13. And okay, let's see where that was, how it got around our content filters, and,
Right.
And we can go from there. But again, that conversation is super nonchalant, and like, he knows he's not going to be in trouble for accidentally coming across something, or
Exactly.
even when he actually is like, I saw something and then I kept looking, like, because he's told me that before too, and then we can, okay, well, let's, figure out what that, what was going on there, and then we can go from there.
Right. Good.
Yeah, thanks. I try. Here, let's pull up a couple of these questions. I do have more questions for Steve, but let's get to these viewer questions first. So we have Christopher. Are there apps that will point out too much time versus excessive time, managing time well for the phone and app time? Do you have any recommendations? I know of a couple as well.
I mean, you can use there's a device within, well, it depends if you have an iPhone or not. I know iPhones better than I know you. Why don't you start actually with the Google phones, because I'm less au fait with them.
Yeah. So for parents, there's for Android devices, there is digital well-being, and it's just a setting inside the Android device, and it'll tell you exactly what apps you've been looking at. You can limit your own time spent on these apps. But I also like some third-party apps. So one of my favorites is called Space. And if you look up Space, and that would be agnostic, so it could be on Android and iPhone, but it would like, you can set different goals. Like, so I've set a goal of how many times I unlock my phone in a day. And so if I'm getting close to like, hey, you only have 5 more times to unlock your phone today, and things like that. So that really helps me to kind of overcome any addiction that I've got. And then you can set time limits for specific apps, like in those kind of apps. But Space will really help you set different goals. Like, okay, my goal is like, I'm always just unlocking my phone and like not even doing anything important after I've unlocked it. So so that was one thing I wanted to focus on. So there's different categories. Like, so whatever you're using your devices the most, then I would go for a solution that kind of tailors to that.
Let me follow up with that then. And I'm not going to talk about iPhone, but I'm going to talk about Verizon again. So apologies for this.
Okay.
But
Oh
they
yeah, no worries.
they have a really good suite of tools. They describe it as an app. It's called Smart Family. And what I like about it is, if you both get your broadband from Verizon and you have Verizon phones, it covers both. There's so many things where it's, you have to lock down your router for this, and you have to lock down the phones for that. This combines it. It even has a button called Stop the Internet, which is absolutely incredible. I saw it work, and particularly just before dinner time, when you're trying to get the kids off their game consoles, off their tablets, off their phones. Oh, and getting dad off the couch and off of his phone. Stop the Internet stops it all, because it's both the broadband and the cellular. So that's one of my favorites.
No, I love that. And then to your point, that iOS also has something called screen time,
Right.
and so you can go like if you're looking at this for yourself, you can obviously go into screen time, see what apps you're using, how long you're using your apps, and you can limit time for your own devices as well. And then you can do the same thing for your kids' devices. If you haven't been doing any management or monitoring, then you can go into screen time or go into digital well-being on Android and see exactly how long they're spending on different apps and go from there. Um,
Mhm.
Too much time, like for me, it's dependent on everybody. So, if my son's been gaming and his attitude starts getting poor, then I'm like, okay, I think you're done with the game for the day, or I'll just set a specific time frame. And then once they've hit that, then I'm like, they have to come and ask me for more time. Like, okay, have you done your chores? Have you done your homework? Things like that, and then I'll grant more time as their attitude and whatever. But I kind of keep it in those small increments so that they're
Mhm.
constantly having to ask for more time, and then I can check in and see how they're doing, and then I can give them more time. But
Yeah.
like overall totals, I'm not gonna say it a number.
Right. No, I don't think there is. I mean, God in her wisdom has not handed down, this is how many hours per day. I mean, we're all making this up as we go along, quite frankly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then we've got another question here. How to control that kids turn their phones off at night. Like Stephen was saying, um, if you have Verizon, something like Smart Family, all of the cellular carriers have stuff like that. And then your Wi Fi router, for me, my Wi Fi router, I can just hit suspend internet and it turns off the internet. But I also have those time frames that I can set, and you can set those time frames in Smart Family as well.
And there's a non-technological solution. Put your phones in a closet. Everybody does, and let them charge overnight. So something's going on, but that's where it's left. Don't let them take it into their bedrooms.
Yeah, yeah, I love that as well. And then make sure there's like a key on the closet door. And
Yeah, certainly as they get older, you'd have to lock the door at night
right.
and then get the key to bed. I mean, you have to think of these things.
Yeah, because I've heard of so many people like, oh, okay, well, all the phones charge in my bedroom every night, and I'm like, oh, so you stay up all night and make sure they stay there, you know, because sometimes kids can wake up and like sneak into your room, especially if you're a heavy sleeper. I'm a huge heavy sleeper, so I can't
Mhm.
rely on something like that because they'll come in and I won't even know. Um, so let's hit some more of my questions. So we talked very, very briefly, and I love this topic. And we were talking a little bit before the live started, and you said you listened to a little bit of my one with the lawyer Liz, but I want to talk about the like current online safety laws and the proposed online safety laws that are kind of going on. So COPA, which is the one that's in effect now, and then the ones that are like coming out. What are your thoughts on those? And let's talk a little bit about that.
So obviously, we welcome anything that improves safety for kids, and that's kind of a no-brainer. The problem becomes, I mean, the devil always is in the detail with
Right.
legislation, and let's not forget we have federal legislation in the form of the Kids Online Safety Act that is, well, the Senate has it at the moment. I don't think there's a complementary bill in the House yet. But also the Californian Age Appropriate Design Code, which is about to be signed into law. We're pretty sure it will be, which is almost a carbon copy of what they passed in the UK. Never mind, the UK is also, sorry, Europe has created two new bills that will impact American tech companies in the way in which they operate. So,
It's true. Yeah.
um, and here's another conundrum. The stronger you legislate for safety, and as I said at the beginning, we're all about that. You then have to balance the privacy issues. So for instance, we're in the midst of a big research project looking at the use and attitudes of kids and parents in the US, UK, and France on age assurance techniques,
Sure.
age gating, age verification, how old are you, basically?
Right.
And how do you tell the difference between a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, or a
Mhm.
17-year-old and a 19-year-old? Okay. And how do you do that? I mean, one way to do that is just gather as much personal information about these kids as you possibly can to make a determination. But the more you do that, the more you impinge on their privacy, or at least create an environment where their personal information could be passed on, hacked into, you name it. So the balancing act between safety and privacy is a really, really tough one.
Yeah.
And there's certain elements in some of these laws that we're seeing that we absolutely applaud, but there are other elements, including even describing, with the Kids Online Safety Act, for instance, it was obviously the intention was to handle and go after the kinds of things that the Facebook whistleblower was talking about on Instagram and
Right.
other social media sites. And yet they've incorporated in the platforms that the bill or the law would apply to sites like Disney and Netflix. And it seems strange to us that take Netflix as an example. They curate their videos, they label them with an age rating, and then they have parental controls. So I have sort of three layers of safety there. So for them to be swept up in this rule, and the same with Disney, and even sites like LinkedIn, it seems kind of odd to us that
Mhm.
they would do that. Now that's one of those devil in the details issue, but we have to pay attention to the whole range of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super interesting. And I know lawyer Liz and I talked a lot about that whole age verification. Like, how do you verify a person is that age while keeping privacy? And I think that's um, one of the big hurdles for this kind of legislation is like, how do you implement this kind of thing? Especially if the company is in a different country, how are you going to regulate a social media platform that is from a different country, because they wouldn't need to abide by our laws and things like that. So I think it gets very murky when you try and force tech companies to want to pay attention to safety, but then how do you also get them to want to implement safety in their tools?
Well, and I would go further. I think even before we move forward with these internet safety laws, how about getting a federal privacy law on the books that has been called for over 20 years, so that right across the US, we know what our privacy rights are online,
Yeah.
kids included. And then from there, we can build out what safety measures should also be included. Without a federal privacy, I mean, what's happening now is you're getting a patchwork of laws,
Right.
California, but other laws too. And then it becomes really confusing, and it becomes a disincentive, not just for the large players, but some of the smaller apps and others are like, well, we're not going to touch under 13s, that's for sure.
Right.
Because there's so much regulatory burden and
Yeah.
danger of us getting fined by the FTC.
Mhm.
But at the same time, we want better quality content and experiences for our kids online.
Right.
But if this is going to dissuade people from going into, that's not a good thing. So
Right.
lots of things to keep in mind.
Yeah, for sure. So, if the government isn't involved and there's nothing forcing them, what do you think social media organizations can do better at this point in order to help improve safety for kids
Um,
who are trying to get on, even though they're not 13? Like, you're not supposed to have an account here because they're not
right,
13. But yeah,
right. Take their responsibilities more seriously. I mean, they always say we take this seriously, and yet there's always ways in which they can improve,
yeah,
always ways in which they can tweak things, so that they're not manipulating kids, or not manipulating us as adults.
right,
I just feel they could do better on responding to reports. I mean, one of the things that really frustrates teenagers that I know of is they report something on, say, Facebook, but they don't hear back.
Right.
Or, I let Snapchat know about that, but, it just disappeared. So they need to do a better job of responding quickly, taking things down, but informing their young users and us oldies as well, how they're handling some of this. I mean, I had to call out Facebook some years ago. They had beheading videos online from Mexico.
Yeah.
My daughter was in high school at the time. Dad, this is what everyone's looking at. I can't watch it, but you
Right.
probably ought to see this.
Yeah.
And the BBC called me. Isn't this beyond their content? I said, yeah, it is.
Yes.
Now, to their credit, they did take them down, but they were up until that point arguing that it was in the public interest. Well, okay, you can claim your First Amendment rights, but with your rights come responsibilities.
Yeah.
And we advocated for the idea of interstitials, like a temporary screen over content that may well be in the public interest, like the end of Saddam Hussein, for instance. But it doesn't just automatically pop up on your feed. You actually have to declare that you're over 18, of course, whatever.
Yes, I'm over 18.
Over 18, and I want to say, so in other words, it puts up some friction at least.
And I think, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, we want to see more innovations like that.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I believe Twitter is actually doing that these days, where it has kind of a, blacked out screen. Where it's like, this image might not be appropriate, and you click and then you can see the image.
Yeah.
So I think I think it's a great direction to move into. That way you don't get a lot of this accidental viewing. Of course, it's not going to prevent a kid from like just clicking and getting into it, but I think it helps a lot for sure.
Yeah. Twitter's an interesting example because they have been doing that. They actually have adult content on their platform in a way that most social medias do not. And I'm kind of surprised that they haven't been called out on that more often. I was just reading an article about how they were looking to monetize that. And that got scuppered for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, they need to take more responsibility for their platform.
Absolutely. And, while Twitter, I think, is probably one of the worst for that kind of adult content. But a lot of people are surprised when I tell them that Pinterest has inappropriate content and Instagram has inappropriate content. Probably not to the extent that Twitter does, but, it can be found on almost all of the platforms for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's not to say we should have a PG-13 world and, that adult content shouldn't be available. But I think that if there is going to be that, there has to be better segmentation. And of course, we have to get age assurance right, too.
Right. Yeah. Which is definitely going to be a huge hurdle to overcome. Like I said, lawyer Liz and I dug into that for probably half of our conversation with about age verification. But so like just kind of to wrap everything up, like where do you think the responsibility lies in like protecting our kids online? Is it with the school, with the government, with the parents? Like where do you think the big chunk of that responsibility should lie?
Yes, to all of that.
To all of it, all of the above. C.
So we have a chart in the office, and it's a big circle, and it's called the culture of responsibility. That's our concept, that we need enlightened public policy, well-resourced law enforcement, robust industry self-regulation, but also parents, teachers, and the kids themselves all taking different but overlapping areas of responsibility for safety online. And I do stress that the kids, particularly as they get a little older and get onto using online safety tools, they have a responsibility too.
Yes.
They should also not engage in cyberbullying. They should not be passing on nude pictures from classmates. They should not be harassing others. But then back to the parents, parents, be that good digital role model. Don't show your kids that you can act out online anonymously and there's no repercussions, for instance.
Yeah.
Um, so it takes a village. I know that's an old, tired phrase.
Right.
There is no one simple, easy solution to this one. Um, Industry most certainly needs to do better. Law enforcement needs our support and our help and our resourcing it to catch the really bad actors. And there are some very bad actors out there. And we haven't even touched on child trafficking and CSAM, child sexual abuse material, and so on.
Right.
But they have a very unenviable task on their hands.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's down to each and every one of us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. It was so good. This conversation was enlightening and fascinating. So I'm so happy that we were able to have it. So if anyone needs any more information, his website is fantastic. I'm going to just pop that up on the screen really quick. So it's just this Family Online Safety Institute, FOSI.org. I will put a link to it in the description on YouTube and on Facebook here. So you guys can hit that right away. There's a ton of resources and information available there. So make sure you check that out for sure. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
Stay safe out there. It's a pretty wacky world, but if we get this right, it's not just risks and harms. There are some great rewards for us and our kids. And quite frankly, the kids are often way ahead of us in terms of how they think they will be using technology in the future. Obviously at their schools, but in their work and in their future lives. So, let's be this co-pilot with them on this journey.
Totally agree. Thank you again so much. Thanks everyone for showing up. If you do have any questions for Stephen or for me, you can pop that in the comments. I'll try and respond if I see them. But I will see you guys next week for the next Family Tech Live. And thank you for joining.
Thanks.